just bite naturally. Yes, we're in for some good fishing in Canada. You know I'm in my prime when a fighter's on the line, taking all the strength I've got to reel him in. When I tell the boys back home about the one that got away, they'll be wishing they'd come with us, feeling easy, feeling free. They'll be wishing they'd come fishing in Canada. Yes, we're in.
I always know when we're coming on because I get interruption in the music. I'm just
starting
the tune up. Hi guys, how you doing?
How's it going?
Are you a little? You're looking a little pale today. Are you okay?
You know,
or am I looking a little colored?
Well, you look very colored. You must have got some sun on the weekend.
I did. I got a ton of sun yesterday.
Yeah, but it's funny that you say that because I woke up this morning and I did not feel good. I have a pretty good health record going on, right? So when I don't feel good for no reason, not like if it's self-inflicted with a little bit of beer and whiskey and wine, okay, I get that. That's what happens. But when I thought, shit, I got to call in. I might have to call in today. I have to run in and get my lighting kit and bring it back home. But then about an hour and a half in, I was good. I felt great after that. So I don't know what the hell was going on. But maybe I am palish. Maybe.
No, I did get sun yesterday, man. I was in the sun for now the secret's out. I took a half a day off yesterday because it was my birthday.
Nice. Happy birthday, buddy. Again.
Thanks, buddy. And I spent it in the backyard.
Yeah.
And man, was that ever nice. It was great.
On the deck?
Yeah. I'm doing some work back there. So it was just so nice to get some of that vitamin D.
Did you have a cold beer on your birthday?
I did not.
Buddy.
It's funny.
You're Canadian. It's a hot day. You're in the backyard.
I did not.
Come on.
And it didn't dawn on me till just now, till you just mentioned it. You get cold when. Anyways, a couple of quick messages first to you folks. We are starting back to work on Monday. It's now official. Everybody will be back at Pine Post Monday. So we kind of got to figure all this out at Pine Post with everybody on location. What we're going to do for the first week for sure, we're going to take this Wednesday webcast and move it into the Friday webcast. So what we're going to do is combine the Q&A with the special guest webcast until we can get our heads around how this is going to work in the studio, because we've got some great ideas. We were talking to some of our tech guys as to how they foresee us doing this once everybody is in Pine Post. So it's going to be pretty cool, but it might take us a few days to kind of get it all together.
So just remember, it's going to be Friday at noon, and probably that first hour, Angelo and I will do the Q&A with everybody, and then at 1 o'clock or whatever we deem necessary, we'll try for the 1 o'clock thing. We'll bring the guest in and we'll go from there. If that hopefully that everybody can get her down to one day. We'll still keep everybody going, and we'll make it as fun as these have been for sure. We're not going anywhere. We're just going to work at it.
Yeah, well, listen, we're playing it by ear. Who knows? Yeah. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. Let's be honest about it. So we're gonna do whatever we can. We're even
worried about like where Angelo and I want to do it is in the radio booth, but we got to keep our physical distancing in there. So we have to figure out a way of doing, on the end of the table, splitting up like that. It should be set up perfect for it. We get the guy behind the glass in the radio room, so it should be good for it. But we have to figure all that out still. So
yeah, it's the ideal scenario really in there. I mean, as long as we go in at separate times through the single entrance that goes into that room, you and I should be great.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start first of all with stuff that we missed last week, Pete.
Yep. We got some questions that we wrote down from the Roland Martin one. I hope everybody enjoyed Roland. I'm sure they did. It seems like the numbers show it. They're doing half decent. We've had some great guests. We have Roland, Bert Pitre, Kranzi, and Reno. So I think that's a pretty good lineup. It's hard to beat that kind of lineup. You know what I mean? So, who do you get next? By the way, we should throw that question out to everybody. We're open to suggestions. If you want, email info@fishingcanada.com and send anything that you think would be a great guest, just in case we're missing somebody. We got a good lineup too in our minds. But if you have an idea, please let us know. Or even here, just let us know.
Yeah, it's a good point because it's hard for us. I mean, we've been on this since we started the webcast. We've been on the TV host or media personalities that we brought on. We just did that because obviously that's closest and nearest and dearest to our hearts. But that's not where we need to go. I mean, if you've got some other ideas for us, by all means, let us know. Whatever you think would be of interest to us as a group, we'd be more than happy to explore. Even if we don't know the personality or the person, we'll reach out, contact them. I mean, that's what we do. So just let us know. You can either do it here on this webcast, just put messages up, and Jordan will fire them off to us as he reads them, or you can send us emails, as most of you do already, anyways. So,
first question from last week, Phillip Landry asked, have you ever had a dangerous experience while recording your shows, i.e. other boaters, wild animals, other people, inclement weather, etc.? Do you remember anything offhand?
Let's throw inclement weather out completely, because you and I kind of like hanging out in that stuff anyway. So I don't think that's been an issue. I talked last week with Roland. When Roland was on, we talked about some crazy wild boat trips that we've made, but nothing that I would really say dangerous. I mean, there's been a couple dangerous things, but wild animals, certainly not here. Out of the country, a few. We
were close to bears there at Arrington's, but he had them, he had to use the rake to scare them away and stuff like that. Yeah. So it wasn't like it was life threatening. It could have been, but
were you with me at Brooks Falls, Alaska?
Yeah, for the grizzlies. Yeah,
the grizzly bears.
Yeah.
You were on that shoot, right?
Yeah, we were running through the trails going, "Hey bear, hey bear."
Yeah, and then on the way back, we were pretty confident. We weren't saying "Hey bear" as much, and all of a sudden, woof! Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah. That was scary.
I'll tell that story pretty quick. We were in Brooks Falls, Alaska, and Brooks Falls is that famous place where you see about 95% of the grizzly bear footage that you see, where the grizzly bears are all sitting on these rocks right across the river, and the salmon are jumping in, and the grizzly bears are catching them with their mouth and all that stuff. Well, those for the most part are shot at Brooks Falls. And so, oh God, help me on this one. I'm going to say 20 years ago, Pete, maybe.
Oh, maybe. Man. Yeah.
Anyways, we scheduled ourselves to go in there and shoot the salmon coming up the river and the grizzly bears and all that stuff. So you fly in a float plane to Brooks Falls, and there's a little ranger station there that greets you the minute the plane gets in, and you go through this whole process of they acclimatize you to your new surroundings, and they go through a lot of detail about what you're about to experience and how dangerous it can be, and how to, the do's and don'ts. And one of the things that they impressed the hell of us on was the fact that, unlike other wildlife shoots that we've been on this one, you need to make a lot of noise. And as you're walking from the ranger station to the waterfall itself, there's some shots there, which was, I'm going to say, roughly speaking, about a 2-kilometer walk through the bush. And then at one point you go through this big open field with tall grass that comes up to your chin, right? And so, and remember that? They told us that, if you're going to encounter any bears they said there should not be any bears along the way. They're all at the waterfall chomping down on the salmon that are in full run right now. So you shouldn't have any encounters during your trek in. However, better to be safe than sorry. They really impressed on us that you have to make noise, and you have to keep shouting, "Hey bear," and clapping your hands and ringing bells and all kinds of stuff. So we did going in because we were terrified. No problems going in. We get there and there was 12 bears, I think, Pete. 12.
Oh, yeah, it was ridiculous.
It was just like a wall of grizzly bears. And like, it's you and them. I mean, it's insane. And that the closest human being is 2 miles behind you at the ranger station. So it's kind of a surreal experience. You're sitting on this man-made structure, this like a little veranda that's up a little bit higher than where the bears are, and you walk up into it and you close the gate behind you, and now you film and you're there for the day if you want. So we were there for the longest time, and we got some of the most incredible footage I think we've ever been able to capture since we've been doing this. And now it really is a little deceiving because, Pete, you'll remember, all of a sudden, those bears weren't these big, monstrous creatures that they were in our minds when we came in, because we just spent hours with them, watching them frolicking around and eating and looking at us. And you could almost reach out, like you could almost pet them. They almost became friendly, if you will. But now it was time to go back. So, because we had this newfound confidence in these animals, we forgot what we should have been doing, and that is making a lot of noise and clapping and saying, "Hey, bear." And we got about halfway back. Now, they had told us, do you remember what the sound was that the bear makes, Pete, that when it's a little nervous and upset? And
was it like a snort, or was it a snort or something like that?
Oof.
Yeah, okay,
Oof.
Yeah.
It was the blowing out of this, it was a oof, and they kept, letting us hear the sound. When you hear that, there's problems. And so anyway, so we're walking back and everything's good. We're talking about, wow, what a great experience that was. And remember that shot? Did you get that scene where the bear and the trout? It was just great. And we forgot what we were supposed to do. And all of a sudden, all we could hear was woof in the grass, and the grass is shaking in front of us, and all of us dropped everything we had, and everybody just scattered in different directions.
And screaming. Oh man,
hey, remember that?
Scary. That was that. Yeah, you're right. That's one of the scarier parts. Encounters in our lives. I've also, he says, people too. I know personally. I know Angelo wasn't on either of these trips, but I've had on Lake Simcoe once. I was fishing a shoal, dead flat water, and this arsehole, this big Bobby Dazzler cruiser drove by me, I bet you 50 feet from the Fishing Canada boat, and just with a whole wide open, how big Simcoe is, right through the gigantic wake, didn't give a shit, didn't care about anything like that. So I had that guy doing that, and you yell and scream to them, nothing you can do. They're just going at 30, 40 mile an hour, so they're gone. So they almost swamped us. The waves actually literally came in the boat. I had another guy in Georgian Bay one time, fishing muskie, and we were fishing a bank. And we were shooting, and I don't know whatever possessed this guy, but he came through with his little tin boat, and instead of going around us, he went between us and the shoreline, ripping as fast as he could between us and the shoreline. And I think he might have been mad that we were there shooting his area or whatever, you know what I mean? Didn't say a word. And this time, so now I've already had a guy in Simcoe one time doing it, and I got a bobby bait on about that big, and I had it wound right back, and I was ready to clock this guy with it. I swear to God, I was out at the cameraman. I think it was Dan. Somebody said, "Petey, no." So I swung back, and I didn't cast there. One more time I had when I was up on Clear Lake, and I had a couple buddies fishing with me, and a guy started throwing rocks at us in the boat from his dock. He started throwing rocks at us. He said, it's like Don Cherry says, if you fish my dock, I'll throw the rock. That's what he would say to us. And I thought he was joking at first. And then all of a sudden, boom, they started getting closer. And I wasn't going to go fish his dock. If he's standing on the dock.
Was that Don Cherry or Cronzy? Because Cronzy made that comment.
Well, I know, but this guy quoted Cherry on it. So I don't know whoever started that whole thing. But he did. I'll remember vividly for the rest of my life, because it got quite heated after that. So then he got closer. So now I'm thinking, who is this asshole? I'm gonna stand my ground. I'm not gonna fish his dock because he's on it anyways, right? So now he starts winging them, and he threw one right between me and the guy in my boat. Right, the rock went right like that. And I says, okay, that's it, boys. And I took my bait caster, and I had a jig or something on, a nice little hard bait. And I just went, oh yeah, arsehole, and I took a bomb cast, and it was going right, I swear to God, right between his friggin' eyes, and I stopped it right with my thumb. I stopped the bait, and it just dropped like that. I says, you want to get into this? And it didn't even stop him. He get the hell out of here. He was screaming and fighting. I should have just let him have it between the eyes. But I wanted to get out. I wanted to get out on the dock and go home. But my buddies, again, thought better of it. He was livid, but I was really livid. And he was throwing them, like ripping these rocks at us at as fast as and hard as he could. He wanted us nowhere near. He said, that place is for the kids. I said, good for you. That's nice. Let the kids fish here. Don't be an asshole. So that's kind of stuff that we have had in our lives.
That is so unlike you, eh?
Oh,
very unlike you.
Well, no, it's unlike me. If he would have just said, "Do you mind not fishing my dock?" I'd say, "Absolutely, buddy, not a problem." But when you come out and say, "I fish my dock, I'm going to throw a rock," and they start throwing them.
That's such a controversial issue. I mean, and there's two sides to all those stories. What I mean by that is, God only knows. I mean, this guy could have been a total idiot, like you just, made him out to be, or he could have been a victim of having had a run-in with a couple of other people that were a little more belligerent than he was and you were. So there's. I've often thought about this, especially when we used to fish a lot of tournaments, Pete. We'd go into some of these tiny little lakes, small community lakes, and blast off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and here you've got all this horsepower coming down the lake, and I often envisioned, here's this poor guy who spent his last nickel to be able to buy a little piece of heaven called his cottage, and it's his getaway. It's his only place that he can, escape to on weekends to get away from everyday drudgery. And he comes up and Saturday morning, he's sitting on the dock having a nice coffee and quiet, and all of a sudden, here comes 150 bass boats whizzing by. Like, you know what I mean? You put yourself in that guy's position, and boy, you can understand why there'd be some animosities, right? But the bottom line is you give what you get what you give, and you're right. In most cases,
that guy got a visit by the cops, because what I did after that, I GPSed. I punched the Garmin GPS point in, and then I took the waypoint back to the house, to the cottage, and then I marked it in the truck. Then I took the truck back, marked his house, then gave the address. I wrote the address and all that shit down, and then I went back, called the cops. Says, "Okay, this guy is a dangerous piece of shit on the water, so we need to get rid of him." And the cops went and paid. They called me back, and they said, "Yeah, we paid him a visit, and he's a belligerent dirty old man that just doesn't like anybody." And but they didn't want to do anything about it. So I said,
now you have officially been dubbed Mad Dog by Calvin.
Calvin,
that's going to stick.
Calvin, if you ever get me to cast a bait between your eyes, buddy, don't push it too far, because I might not stop that spool next time.
All right, let's take some questions from the audience, and then we'll go back to these later on. While we've got people here, Jordan, you might as well just plop them up. Okay.
That's a good one.
Where's the difference between rainbow trout and steelhead?
It's a great question.
That's a great question, but very simple. There is no real difference, genetically speaking. However, the whole steelhead craze or notion or inkling came from the West Coast. And what steelhead is basically a rainbow trout that spends part of its life in salt water and the other part of its life in freshwater. And generally, it's from salt water into freshwater in order to perpetuate, in order to spawn. However, when the whole stocking thing started happening in the Great Lakes years ago, those fish took on that same personality, except instead of, salt water, it was lake water to spawning water, which is rivers, creeks, and streams. And that whole steelhead name came from the fact that these fish do spend part of their life in big open water. And then when it comes to reproduction, although some steelhead now, I mean, they're living in some of our creeks pretty much their whole cycle.
Bradley said it best: migratory versus resident. Basically, that's what it is.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably the best explanation, but it's the same fish.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have a steel head, in case.
That guy that's throwing rocks at me, he's got a cement head, though. I'll tell you that. Oh man.
Okay, Carter wants to know, what length action weight do you recommend on a bait casting rod for pike? Didn't we have this question last week?
It might not have been for pike. It might have been more. I don't know.
I use a flipping stick. That's my favorite pike rod. A long 7.5 foot, 8 foot flipping stick with a lot of backbone. It needs to be a little bit light on the top end. In other words, a fairly lively tip so that you can make a cast without killing yourself. But I like a broomstick for pike personally. Now, Pete, you've probably got it.
Yeah, I've been changing my ways of late, especially with the advent of braided line coming in that I need a softer rod. I don't like a soft rod for pike, but I would say a medium heavy for me, a 7 foot at least, You can get away with 610, but 7 foot is a real nice number, 7.2, 7.3, medium heavy, but lots of backbone in that medium. And I really like that rod. I could take that rod, that 7 to 7.2. I could take 8 of those and fish for muskie. I could fish for bass, smallmouth, largemouth, any kind of bait casting stuff. I like that action. It's just got a nice smooth tip. It gives a little more leeway. You get a nice kind of a pause on your hook set. It's not so quick, the hook set, because you can pull baits out of the mouths of fish with a stiffer rod like that nowadays with the braid. So I'm more lines of a medium heavy now for almost everything now. And I'm getting older too, so I need a little bit of extra flex.
Here's my only problem with that, and the only circumstances that would really, really dictate that flip and stick or really heavy rod, like I like to use, is when you're fishing pike in shallow, weedy back bays. And you know yourself, sometimes what happens when you get that big one on and it's running all over the place, picking up weeds as it's going through that weed bed. Yeah. And if you don't get that rod up and force that line up, breaking through the weeds, that thing can be like a bumper car. It's connected to all kinds of weed beds. And you can get yourself in trouble. So I like that really heavy broomstick because I can rip up through those weeds and tear everything up, so I'm not all tangled up. That's all. But other than that, you're right. And it's funny. You don't need really heavy gear to fight big fish. There's just no way. No, it's not today with today's equipment, today's drag systems, today's lines. You don't need it. I just prefer it.
And you know what? Another thing I think you got to realize, people here, and I'm just noticing this right now, is I believe Angelo is talking about way up northern Ontario, those big gal pike, the big giants. Well, you know what? I'm thinking more of southern Ontario now, more smaller fish, up to 12 pounds, 14 pounds. He's thinking of 15s and ups, and then you got to go to that heavy stuff for sure. You know what I mean? So think about it that way. If you're going for the big girls, take his advice, take the flip and stick. And if you're going for an all rounder, then ease up on it, get a medium heavy maybe. That's because if you're fishing, you're just out for fun and you're going for 8, 9, 10. A 10 pounder is a big one. Then that medium action rod also gives a lot more fun too. There's a lot more flex to it. You just have a little more fun with it. So keep that in mind, maybe. Hope that answered it.
I think we got it covered. Jamie wants to know, for spring lake trout fishing, do you use the same tactics as summer? Deep water, colors, jigging, trolling? Wow. Depending on how early and where. No, absolutely, totally different. Completely different tactics. There are situations, and you don't need to travel into the northern part of the country to experience this. In fact, most of the southern lakes that have got lake trout in them, early in the season. We're talking, there's a lake not far from here that's famous for it, Lake Joseph. And the lake trout there in that first week to 10 days of ice out, when season is open, they're on the surface. And so most guys will go in there and they'll just basically either trolling, dragging baits behind the boat on the surface. Planer boards are really big for that particular fishing, or they'll cast for them. So they're up high. As soon as that window goes, and that window is a week to 10 days, as soon as it's gone, they're down deep. And so it's an entirely different game that you need to play. But that early season, that planer board fishing for lake trout is fantastic. Yeah.
And if you're going to go cast for them, which what Angelo said is absolutely a deadly way of doing it, think about going bass fishing. Think about it as your bass fish, because it's the same tactics. These fish, they're in that clean water. You throw a 4 or 5 inch white fluke or something nice and bright, like a fluke bait that doesn't even have any weight on it, and twitch that around, and you won't believe the fun you will have with something like that. Some braided line or floral, and just when you're casting for Lakers early in the year at that ice out period, there's nothing better, actually. It's so much fun because now you're fishing for big fish and you're casting for them, and they rip.
Now you said braided or floral.
Yep.
For not top water fishing, but certainly fishing the top water column. Would you not use mono at all in that situation?
Oh, yeah, you could certainly use mono too. But I mean, for me, because lake trout are so big, strong, nasty, and beefy, and a hard mouth, I want to get a good hard hook set in there. So I want that braid is really nice, and that floral has got stretch, but it doesn't have as much stretch as mono. So I'm kind of opposite stretch on that one when I'm talking these baits like a fluke or something, or a tube or something like that. I want to get that hook into that big dirty job, because if you get let's be honest, you and I have seen so many 15+ pound lake trout, and their mouth is like, it's like that table, right? It's hard. There's not a lot of meat in there, so you got to get it in there when you get it. So,
I laugh only because the minute, I think of lake trout, you and I fishing lake trout, I think of that mountain lake.
Long Mountain Lake.
Oh my God. That was the best fishing I've ever had in my life.
See, and that right there, it was early-ish. It wasn't summer. They were down on 30 feet, but we were running braid on those big swim baits, right? You couldn't have set that hook with mono on those things. I mean, we were using heavy rods, and the swim baits were like 3 ounce, 4 ounce baits at least. You know what I mean? So it was that was a good trip. That was fun.
Anyways, hopefully we answered your question for you. Brian McDonald, do you have any intel on if fishing camps, etc., will be open for rentals this summer? Or that's all I've done this week, by the way. I've been talking to camp owners. I've been talking to the tourism people. I've been talking to the travel people. I've been talking to customers who are booked into these places. As of right now, nothing is open. I don't want to sound negative on this, because God only knows we've had enough negativity about this whole thing for the last couple of months. But I have to be a realist, and knowing the way the infrastructure works for most of these operators, I'm going to say that a lot of them will not open this year. The really far fly-in places will not open this year. That's negative as hell, but I think it's the truth, for the simple reason that, even if things started opening up 2-3 weeks, a month from now, keep in mind, first of all, the border has to be open for a lot of them that are really up in the northwestern part of the country, or of the province especially. Some of them are American owned. So their owners, I know we have one that comes regularly on this webcast, Ted Putnam. I don't know whether he's here with us today, but Ted is in Boston and he owns a Hawk Lake Lodge. And so just that part of this shutdown and pandemic is affecting him. He can't cross the border, so technically that place can't open up. There's a lot of owners that are US, but for the Canadian owners, their problem is that a lot of their customers are US. So, and I'll go as high in the northwestern sector of the province, as high as 85% of the bookings are American. So without the border being open, or at least a date when it might be open, it's impossible for them to even start thinking of opening up their own camps. The other problem is, 2 problems, is staffing. And that's not an easy issue, especially in remote parts. Now, you might think in remote parts of the province that'd be really simple, but it's not. They're under the same pandemic shutdown and warnings and protocol as everybody else in the province. So just organizing staff and bringing staff in and having them work under the distancing rules and stuff is almost impossible in some of these camps. Next problem is flying in. They have to have all of their supplies flown in. They have to have all of their customers flown in. Well, flying right now is not at the top of the list of things that people are doing, regardless of what part of the country they're in. So there's so many. How
do you fly 4 guys into a float plane? They're all from different addresses.
Well, here's something I heard this week, Pete, from our good friend Carol Caputo, is that some of the operators are starting to, understand that this isn't going away soon. Right. So a lot of the float planes that you and I have flown on, they've put partitions, plastic partitions,
from the pilot to the guys,
from the pilot to the back. So now you're looking at 1 or 2 max people that can fly in at a time. So the parties of 5 or 6 are gone.
Even if they drove up by them together in a truck, they're still not going to put them in that plane together. They're going to say it's going to cost you in the long run. It's going to have to pay for fuel somehow or whatever. So,
well, you just brought up a good point. So if there's a party of 4 or 5, I mean, forget the flying part. What are they going to all bring their own vehicles? If they're going to drive them separately?
Why wouldn't you? If it was a world-class fishing trip and you could, and so doing it,
Man,
I know.
Hey, from all indications right now, nobody knows. There are no answers. It's not unlike the National Hockey League or basketball league or baseball. Everybody's trying to figure out how to deal with this, and everybody's working feverishly to make it work. But I don't know, man. And it affects Pete and I because that's what we do for a living, right? We go into these places, and so we're on the phone every day. We're trying to find out what our future looks like moving forward, and it's.
I think these lodges need to give you and I the keys, buddy, and we'll just go in and just take a couple months in Ted's place, and then a month in another place, and then we're good. We'll be done.
If Ted's on, hopefully he's listening. Maybe he can mail us his keys, and we'll drive up. Like, hey, have at it. Just
oh boy, we got smallmouth, we got pike, we got lake trout, we got walleye, yellow, and we can find
separate vehicles, though.
Well, that's okay for that place. It'd be worth it for a month up there. Oh God.
All right, Chris B wants to know, hey guys, thanks for taking on the Q&As. Walleye bite starting to pick up with the weather and water temp.
Yes.
For sure. My question is, what's your go-to baits for colder water walleye casting from shore? From shore. Okay. Can I be perfectly honest with you? I can't remember the last time I fished walleye from shore. Do you, Pete? I mean, aside from getting off a float plane and while I'm unloading the plane, you're getting a rod out casting from shore. Aside from that, okay. All right.
The only thing you unloaded from the plane is you unloaded your pants after you shit them. Okay, that's about it. Okay, that's about all you ever unloaded from a plane. So let me do this one. I still swear, in cold water, you will not beat a jig and minnow. And if you're allowed to use live bait there on a spinning rod, so you don't have to cast real hard. You can cast a nice lob cast out. A jig head with a minnow in the back is still the number one all round, in my opinion, walleye bait in cold water. And then you all that Dan's do some
I'm going to ask you a question on behalf of the of Chris. So that's all great if you've got nice clear water that you're fishing, no weeds, no obstruction, no wood, no boulders, no rocks, but you got to get that jig and minnow back to you who is standing on shore.
Right.
Not necessarily easy if you've got obstructions in the way, right?
Right. So what do you bring one jig when you go fishing? Everybody brings 100 jigs when they go fishing, and they bring a bucket of minnows. Come on. And you don't have. I mean, yeah, idealistically you have to hit bottom, but you got to remember that these fish are used to seeing their prey swim. So you can certainly get that bait out, count it down. When you figure out how close it is to the bottom, just get it off the bottom and swim it real slow. And there's no action in the jig and minnow, but it's swimming it really slow. It doesn't matter. It'll have a little up and down action like that. You can avoid stuff if you had to by that real slow reel. That's the, like Ann says, you really need the better conditions because it's an open jig, etc. But it's a go-to. It's one go-to. Let's just say there's more out there for sure, but.
Obviously, a good old minnow bait, whether it's Rapala or Rebel or one of them, a floating bait that you can just slowly work, back to shore is always a good standby as well, especially if you can match the forage color size type of thing. You can never go wrong with that either. So. Yeah, and
walleye specific crankbaits too. So if you do what Angel's saying, you're going to get that top layer done. The jig and minnow is going to get that bottom layer done. If you start picking up these shad kind of shaped crankbaits, Shad Wraps, Berkeley makes them. All the companies make them, and get a nice perch pattern, minnow pattern, whatever's in that area. You've got everything covered right then and there. I mean, we could go into like spinners with a worm too and all that kind of stuff, but those would be your kind of basic choices. Those minnow baits and crankbaits would be aggressive fish more so than anything, but they work a lot. They work great. So,
I got a question for you. Would you ever throw a topwater bait at them?
Well, the topwater would be that bait you talked about, the minnow bait. That would be
topwater bait.
I've never done it. No.
Yeah. Yes, you have. For walleye, Bay of Quinte, at night.
It was still a subsurface. They were all diving minnows that went down barely.
I've thrown top water. I've thrown zero spooks and caught walleye.
Oh, I've never done that. That's good.
And you know where?
where I took you to that one time, right?
Exactly. Top water. So
Really?
there is
Yeah?
a time, because something that people don't realize now, not so prevalent anymore, although I'm sure still quite a bit, uh, is that walleye will predate on frogs. It's not above their pay grade. They will predate on top water. And frogs that are coming offshore, walleye coming in shallow late at night or under real good cover, cloud cover, they'll hit top water baits too, and it's a blast. It's an absolute blast when you get that bite. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while it's magic.
Yeah, that could you imagine doing a show on that? That would be so freaky and crazy to get it done. That particular show we were talking about, we were on a pattern, and it's still to this day is my favorite and best walleye pattern I've ever discovered. A buddy of mine got onto it, and it was insane. The walleye were eating shad at night, and they were using shade as their cover. And on a bad night, you weren't going to catch crap, but on a good night, you were going to catch a 4 to 7 pound walleye on every second or third cast, if not every cast. I had one night there where I was throwing a minnow bait, like Angelo was talking about, bringing it back. I lost 3 or 4 giant, well, not giant, but 4 to 7 pounders on the same cast. You get pulling off, another one would come up, pull it off, another one would come up and hit. And these were not the same fish. And trust me, because they'd feel the hooks in them. Right? There were so many walleye in this spot, but that pattern is gone forever. But I'll never forget it, Ange. That was so fun.
That was the shadow pattern, wasn't it?
Yep. On shad and shadow.
It's something to think about for those of you who fish, walleye late at night. Here's a real good tip, and you can replicate this anywhere. If you've got bridges that have got lights on them, like a highway bridge that's crossing the piece of water that you're fishing, a traditional walleye area, obviously it has to have walleye to start with. But if you can fish that area where the light is causing a shadow from the bridge, that line, that shadow line between light and dark, wow. That's all I got to tell you is wow. You find those areas, and it's like a key to unlock a gold mine. It's that good. But it's a special fishery. It's a special time of night, and doesn't last forever. But if you can get there at the right time and right place, or just think of where you've fished before, where there's a bridge, an overhead bridge that has street lights or some kind of big mercury vapor lamp on it that causes a lot of light. Go there at night and fish the shadow line between dark and light.
And that's the easy one to find. But you can take that and do it to cottages that have light on, the trees around the cottages. It's going to cast shadow, and I'll tell you what, walleye will hide in those shadows, and the bait fish that are swimming around, and they will pounce out. They are so aggressive in that. I mean, there's also the low light periods that when the sun is just hitting there, or that shade is coming up, they're already starting to do that too. So you got just think about shadow. It doesn't have to be just a bridge. It can be anything that's obstructing the light, and these walleyes sit in it, and you could get onto a good one. So,
and you make a good point. It's not just dark, not just night. I mean, how many times have we been on a lake and it's getting late in the day? The sun is 3/4 way down the horizon, and what do? We go fish the shoreline that has the sun looking at us directly in the face as we cast that dark shoreline for the same reason, right? That shadow.
Exactly. So anyway, whatever.
Tim, hey Tim, how you doing, buddy? Your thoughts on using a super glue on braid fluoro line? Take it, Mr. Bowman.
I don't do it. I think it'd be a good idea. I put super glue on my plastics to a jig head. I will do that all the time. I don't do it on my knots. I try to make sure my knots are really good, wet them before drawing it, and then I take it from there. I might have tried super glue on a knot, but I don't know if it made a difference for me, so I don't do it anymore. So
I've heard of this being done. Like Pete, I don't do it, but not for maybe the same reasons. I don't do it because I don't think it makes your knot stronger. I think it makes your line weaker. I think anytime you put that type of substance that I don't know anything about, that is super glue or any of the super glues out there, I think it's got to deteriorate your line, especially if we're talking braid. It's got to start deteriorating it, in my opinion. So I just don't. Just tie really a good knot. I mean, that's all you need.
Yeah, Yeah. I think keep super glue on your boat because it's a good idea to have it on there for all kinds of little things. But I don't know if you need it on your knot or not.
Wow, Adam wants to know what's the best lake to fish in Alberta. Woo-hoo.
Wow. Well, Adam, that's a huge. Alberta's a big province, right? We can give you our opinions on the lakes that we fished, but we haven't fished all lakes. Because I saw a thing on our blog today, Angelo, our top 5 Saskatchewan lakes, and everybody's giving us crap for not picking Diefenbaker. Well, those lakes are the lakes that we chose, that we fished, right? We've never fished Diefenbaker, so we don't know firsthand. We were taking the lakes that we fished, and we're doing it. So these lakes in Alberta that we fished, we can give you the lowdown on those, but that's all we can do, really. So we got Calling Lake, we got Wabaska Lake.
Lac La
Biche, Pinehurst. All these are good. Winifred Lake.
Oh, Winifred's fantastic. And Lesser Slave.
Lesser Slave loaded with walleye.
Loaded with walleye. And we're just scratching the surface here. There are lakes in that province that are just mind-boggling. It's one of the most, and I'll use the word progressive, but sort of tongue-in-cheek. It has one of the most progressive walleye management programs of pretty much any province in this country. They're really, really anal about it. I mean, they are as tight-assed about their walleye as any place I've ever seen in terms of their limits. Some lakes are total catch and release. Some places, they're 1 fish limits, 2 fish limits. So they're really tight on how many fish they let out of a lake. But I got to tell you, there are problems. There are some problems that we've certainly encountered about that theory about total shutdown of a lake. There's a great picture right there. Those are Calling Lake walleye. Now, those walleye in any other body of water would have been huge. But look at the size of the head in comparison to the tiny little body. That's because Calling Lake at that time had a 0 angler retention for walleye. 0. So, and you could not put a bait in the water without catching a walleye. That's how prolific it was. It was just jam-packed with walleye. The problem is they'd eaten themselves out of house and home. They had nothing left to eat except themselves. So that was a problem. AP, that was a great fishery, you have to admit, but
oh my God,
stunted, absolutely stunted.
That's a spot where Angelo Viola threw out the challenge that, and it's the only time it's ever happened, I've ever seen it happen. He goes, I think I can catch a walleye on this jig head without anything on it at all. And I said, oh my, and I couldn't even deny him because the fishing was that good. I says, well, I think you have to try then. He drops it down, and I swear to God, he worked at it, and it didn't happen instantly. He worked at it, and sure as shit, boom, he got a walleye on a painted jig head. That was it. And then no bait, no meat, no nothing on it. So that's how good the fishing was there.
And it's funny because when we came off the water on that lake, we were greeted by the local COs.
Yeah.
And great people. First of all, they checked our license, as they should have. And then we just started having a chat with them about and we'd only been on the lake once or twice 1 or 2 days at that point. But we told them right away what our findings were, and that is that they have to open it up. We really felt that they needed to start letting people take a fish or 2. God forbid 5 or 6 like the rest of the world, but a fish or 2 just to help them. They were starving. They were eating each other, and that's over management. Now, having said that, Hawk Lake has got the same type of really tight management system in place, but Ted's made it work. It works great. So
you know what? He might not have hit the point yet, too, right? I don't know. Or the lake's got a way better forage base in it. He might have a lot more perch or something like that, right? Because Calling was definitely an anomaly. It was odd. But when there was a place called Volkswagen Point. If you ever go to Calling Lake, it's a place called Volkswagen Point. When we got onto that, that's where Hans pulled that deal off that I've never seen before. We were getting so many double headers that we were pissed off with a single header. But we got one fish on a 2-pounder. It was like, what is going on here? This is not right. It was unbelievable. It was that good.
So that's just a few of the lakes, but Alberta's
Athabasca River. If you want a river in Alberta, And Ray Colrus, he can set you up if you want to email us. I don't know, Ray. Real Angling. His company's called Real Angling. Ray does these tour guided trips in a jet boat in the Athabasca River in the fall, and he gets giants upon giants of walleye. He gets 10s all the time, like a lot of 10+ pound fish. So that's another really good one.
I'm glad you brought Ray up. He called me last night, late last night.
I know he did.
For the birthday thing, right?
Nice.
And so I was asking him how he's doing and how long before he gets back to work. And he's got his first trip, his first guided trip coming up first week of June.
Oh, wow.
So he says it's, the government has handed down some very strict guidelines, protocols that he has to adhere to. He can't do the double trips. So you can't do a half a day and then somebody else does the other half day, because he has to completely clean the boat down, disinfect the whole boat front to back. Yeah, and of course masks and
that's right up your alley. Clean the boat for half a day after half a day of fishing. You get your boat sparkling again.
But he's looking forward to getting out.
Good for him.
Yeah, so great guy, by the way. We're going to have an ad. He's going to put an ad on our website, fishingcanada.com. I highly recommend, if you want to experience some Alberta fishing at its finest, you hook up with Ray. Nobody knows that province. Nobody's got their finger on the pulse of that province fishing wise than Ray. So keep an eye out for him.
Great personality, great guy. Very quiet, but he knows his fishing like no other. That's for sure. So
Christine and Andrew want to know, what is the latest news on cormorants? Wow.
Well, I keep trying to kill them, but I can't get them. They're too fast.
So the latest news on, as you may know, the Minister of Natural Resources, John Yakubuski, was on our radio program late last year and said that he was going to put it out to the public as to what they would like to do with the cormorants. I know what he would like to do with the cormorants, by the way, but he put this whole thing up on a government site to get public opinion on what they would like them to do. And then with that information, he was going to take it to the next level, which does unfortunately involve federal politicians. And so that's where it is right now. The message was loud and clear. Okay, we need to do something, and we need to do something now. And that something is in the way of a call, a public calling, an open season, but not like the Wild West, like most people wanted. An open season with some restrictions, do's and don'ts, a type of, what firearms you can use and all that. But if Minister Yakubuski could get the okay from the feds, it's going to happen.
So it had to go to the feds then, Ans? Is that what you're saying?
And the reason being the hunting part, right? The discharging of weapons, not so much the bird, but the discharging of weapons.
Okay.
Has to get their approval. So, but if it was up to John, we'd be having at him right now. And I know that sounds terrible, to some people, especially. We're supposed to be conservationists. We're supposed to love wildlife. We're supposed to be the caretakers of wildlife. So for us to be giddy over being able to cull a breed of animal, it sounds terrible, but I think there's no other solution. If we don't,
you leave it to me, buddy. I'll take care of all the cormorants for you. I'm a good caretaker of cormorants. Don't you kid yourself.
Anyways, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, the pandemic has slowed that whole process down a little bit too.
Yeah.
Here's one for Igor. When was the last time you guys have done steel line jigging for bottom trout?
Steel line jigging? I wonder if he means steel line trolling. I wonder.
Probably. For me, it's got to be 30 years. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I say that 30 years since I can remember.
I'd say the same thing. I've only used steel line for Lakers like once or twice in my life.
Same with me.
Most, you know what I mean?
It's got to be 30 years.
Yeah, and that's back in the day when it was the real short rods. And sometimes they had that big. Remember that big round reel that they had? Remember that thing? That thing was awesome. But it was so archaic looking. Then I used to hear about guys. You ever hear about guys when they get a big one on and they couldn't get it in, they put the steel line on the coil of the motor and kill the voltage would go through to the fish. They pull on the cork and go through the fin. They try to kill the fish. I've heard so many stories like that, the crazy shit that went on.
The truth of the matter is we've come so far since those days, and I'm sure there's still people out there that use it, and I'm sure that they do extremely well, and I'm sure they wouldn't use anything else, and that's all well and good. But the truth of the matter is we've come so far in controlled depth fishing with all the other various tools that we have at our disposal. It's just so much nicer to be able to work a fish, fight a fish with other than steel and a little wee short stubby rod with a little coil spring on the end of it. I mean,
there's a lot of guys are using copper line now, especially out in Lake Ontario. They're running copper line for a variety of fish, not just trout. They're doing it for the salmon too. They're trying to figure everything out. So there's constant evolution of it too, and that's the next evolution. The rods are more modern rods, and these reels are normal line counter reels, and then they run the long lines of copper out there too. So there is still up there, but.
We talked about something when we had Gord Pizer on the program, that is lead core line, which is still being used quite a bit because it has all the same sort of principles as steel line in terms of weight, but none of the negatives associated with fighting a fish on steel line. So, lead core is a good sort of mid-ground line to use if you want to get deep and control your depth without using other equipment. But steel line is.
And let me just correct Igor, however you say your name. Sorry about that. I think nobody uses steel line for jigging lake trout that I know of. I've never, because you don't need to. You remember when you're jigging them, you're dropping straight down, so you can do that with any line, braid, mono, fluorocarbon, whatever. So that steel line is for the trolling aspect of it, the horizontal fishing, where it gets that bait down away from your boat. So that's what normally lake trout fishing was done, Igor, was with trolling with steel line. If you're jigging, you don't need steel line.
No. So, in fact, I think it's a deterrent, to be honest.
It probably would be, yeah. It'd be too stiff. So
Stephen wants to know, are you guys planning or have you planned any fishing trips, even if it's just one of you guys with a GoPro and small camera? No. So, Stephen, if you just joined us, we are regrouping. Pine Post is officially opening up on this coming Monday, and we'll have the team all together again. And we're going to start, mapping out our future and trying to figure out what.
That's probably our first step right there, though, Steve, just to let you know. I mean, right now we can't have a cameraman on the boat. Our boat's big enough to separate a cameraman from a host, no problem. But when you sit down to go somewhere, all of a sudden you're less than 6 feet apart, right? You're even if it was front seat drivers and back seat opposite drivers, you're still too close for that. So we'd have to figure that out first. So really, the only way to do it is for us to get out by ourselves, or just drop the trolling motor and go. We never put the big motor in. I guess I don't know. So
there's just so many questions that we're asking ourselves, and we'll have a better handle on it next week when we talk to you. We'll have a little better handle on what that's going to look like. However, I can tell you, it won't be in the next couple of weeks. Aside from the pandemic, we also have a refitting that's taking place in a couple of weeks. FNC1 is going to be refitted with a brand spanking new Mercury 300R, 300 racing.
We need that. Good God, this guy kills me.
God help us. Chris, you guys should tell the story of you both catching walleye in a 25 square foot area at Isnagi Lake about 12, 14 years ago. There was there to see it. Yeah, you were there. Critter, by the way, we first met Chris Jennings. He was a winner of a contest that we had on the radio show, I believe, on Outdoor Journal Radio. And the prize, we've been giving away stuff forever. It's not just something we've been doing on the internet the last couple of years. We make a real point of trying to get good prizes out to the angling community as often as we can. And one of the things that we did on the radio show is to give away a trip of a lifetime to Lodge 88 in Northern Ontario. And Chris was the lucky winner of that prize, or Critter, as his buddies call him. And Yeah, it was a great trip. What he's alluding to is this magnificent lake called Isnagi. I mean, it is just the most magnificent body of water on the planet. And it's long, and it has arms and fingers and back bays and islands and humps and shoals. It's a walleye fisherman's dream. And we were there shooting that week when Chris went up, and we fished all over the lake for a couple of days. Did okay, did all right. But we ended up shooting the entire episode within a few hundred feet of the lodge, which was crazy. The lodge was in the shot the whole time that the episode was being shot. The lodge was in the background. That's how close to the lodge we were. And the area that we fished, there's a fish from that area. The area that we fished was no more than, I would say, 20 feet wide and about 50 feet long. It was the best.
Oh my God, it was absolutely. I'm looking for more pictures of that place. It was insane. We got onto a bite that was, and like Ange says, the lake is over 20 miles long. And
oh, we lost Pete there. Yeah, over. There you go. Are you back?
I'm there. Hello. Are you there?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah. I was just saying how far. Now the lodge tells you got to go 18 miles down the lake to catch them, and meanwhile we got them right. We watched the lodge the whole time we were catching those fish. It's that good. Oh God!
I talked to David, by the way, the owner of that lodge, see how things are coming along, and he's being very optimistic.
Nice.
Now, keep in mind, they own their own airlines, right? They own their own airline float plane company, so they're able to get a little better answer as to the possibility of flights and stuff. He's really thinking that they will definitely be open for half of the season this year.
Wow.
That's what he's telling everybody. So which is great news. Great news. Absolutely outstanding.
And they're allowed. I mean, they can say that because with David, with the airplane company, they can do whatever they want to that plane, right? They have multiple planes they can do it, so they can do whatever they want with it. They own them, so you're right.
Well, funny enough, but he's also counting on the train helping him, right? Because he's one of the very few places where you've got both. You've got a train and you've got a plane. So he's kind of saying if one doesn't work out, the other one may, and so he's really. He's working hard at making it work. He's in contact with all of his clients, his guests that have already booked in, and he's going to make it work. There's another fish from that shoot. It's fantastic.
With a hump on that head.
And the fish got a hump too.
I was hoping you're going to say that.
Okay, here's one we want. Carter wants to know who spends more money on fishing, Pete or Ange?
Wow. Well, I mean, the long and short of it is through the company and through work for sure. Ange does. It's Angelo's company. Just in case people don't know that, it's still Angelo's company, right? I am an employee here, so we got to say that Ange spends a lot more money than Pete on the fishing. As far as buying junky tackle, like I'm a tackle-aholic. I have to go out and buy stuff and keep up with the latest and greatest all the time. So I do spend.
I think I would say we're about even, and forget Fishing Canada, forget the company, forget all that. But when we go on trips and we stop in at some of those little tackle stores, or when we go to Europe and do some of the trade shows there, I think we're about even. We don't mind spending.
You're right. Yeah, you're for sure you are. And it's funny because it's crazy because we have our own little ideas. We'll go grab this. That looks good. We'll grab that. That looks good. I'll grab this and I'll grab that. Looks good. And then all of a sudden we both see this. Oh, we both hone together and say, look at that. We got to get some of this stuff here. We have to get this. You know what I mean? And so many times those things have worked out for us too on a shoot. Hey, what about those things we picked up in at the basket? Oh yeah. And it works, so.
One that comes to mind is we picked up some baits in England a few years ago. And a lot of times what happens, we'll pick this stuff up and then we'll kind of bury it somewhere in the studio and forget all about it. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, somebody finds it and says, hey, yeah, we should try those, right? And that happened last year. You and Steve were on a shoot. Steve and I were on a shoot.
That's right.
Right? and we brought out those British those baits we bought in England, and thank God, because they were absolutely annihilating the fish. The only problem with something like that is you don't have a box full of them; you only have one or two. So
exactly. I wonder if I got a picture of that guy. It'd be fun. I think I do have a picture. Answer, you keep going there for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's
which one?
It's a Photoshop. It won't. I don't think it'll work. Tell me if this works or not. I doubt very much this is going to show up. No, that's you, right?
No, it's just me. You're gone.
Okay. No, it won't. It's a Photoshop file, so I have to. I'll convert it as we're talking.
When we get in studio next week, we'll be able to do so many cool things. It's going to make your head spin. Right now, Jordan, I want you to switch us back to the other way.
Oh, Jordan, you're in trouble. Jordan's in trouble.
Come on, you can do it. There you go. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. All right, next question. I see. I made him do something in between. And now he's all flustered. The questions are off the table. He's picking them up off his kitchen floor. There we go. Steve wants to know, in Innisfil, you have to be local to launch your boat. What would you consider to be your local launch?
Wow.
Well, I'll tell you, if we're just looking to experiment with some new technology and we just need a quick fix, get the boat in the water, turn on some switches and some power and have a look at something, probably I would say Whitby Harbor.
For us, is he not asking about Innisfil area, or what's that? How is he asking that?
Well, he's saying what would you consider to be your local launch?
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Well, no, maybe he's saying it as it pertains to Innisfil. Who's local and who's not? You have to live in that town to be local?
Yeah, exactly. That's
a great question, man.
Yeah, that's kind of weird in that sense, right? I don't get that one.
Local. I mean, it could be argued that Innisfil is local to Toronto.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm surprised that there's still launches closed, to be honest with you, because I was under the impression that everything had opened. Certainly from a provincial standpoint, they opened everything that they had originally closed. But then municipalities kind of stepped in, and some municipalities were reluctant to allow the openings. Some wanted the openings, but I was under the understanding that they've all opened now.
I was too. That's what I thought for sure. But
Stephen,
I've heard a couple that were closed, but it's the marina or whatever. It's their own choice. They want to get things readied up for the season, so they close them off for that. But they don't stop. You know, you go to the next launch. I've not heard anything about that. I know guys are traveling miles to go fishing, right? So
yeah. But who knows? You know, it's still that's up in the air.
You know, it's a municipality call. I mean, maybe you call somebody in Innisfil area or the government. Ange and I are furthest thing from cops that ever were.
Oh yeah. Jason Gaudette wants to know, I want to fish for striped bass here in Prince Edward Island, but I never have before. I don't have a boat or any info or suggestions, locations and or bait. On the island. I'll bet you they're there. I don't see why they wouldn't be.
If there's flowing rivers coming in, which I'm assuming there is.
Yeah, unless they're all stopping, just well prior to PEI on the outer banks. Whether it's Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, might be, but I doubt it. I'll bet you they're there. You know what the problem is? Here we had an interesting situation last 2 years ago, I guess it'd be now, right? Or was it last year? When did we do the striper thing in Nova Scotia? Last year. So the fellow that Greg Beliveau, that we were fishing with, he's a local, and he was born and raised right there on Bay of Fundy, and he has been fishing stripers since he can remember as a little kid. So he's fished them all his life. However, if you research stripers in Nova Scotia, you'll see that most of the reference says that they're just new meaning that they've just started migrating further north the eastern seaboard over the last 10 years and are now just calling Nova Scotia and New Brunswick home. Well, Greg tells us No, nothing could be further from the truth. It's just that nobody's ever fished them. And
Right,
he's been
exactly.
fishing fish since he was 10.
Exactly.
So, right. So I'm thinking PEI is probably the same, you know?
Because we did it many years before 10 years ago. We've done striper shows out on the East Coast before that too. And they weren't big giants that they are now, but that was definitely a longer time ago. I think the Annapolis River was one, and the St. John. Well, the St. John is yeah. So they've been up there for a long time. Now he might be able to access if there's no rivers coming in a PEI. There's probably a fishery in the ocean for them with his boat. You know what I mean? Like we did. There's got to be an area where these fish are working, and it probably you have to get local intel to find out first off if there's stripers, where they are. Then you go from there because location we don't know, but bait wise, they're an aggressive fish. They're a really aggressive bass. Let's just say that, and they're big. And any saltwater fish is a tussle to begin with, right? And they live amongst sharks. They live amongst all that kind of stuff. So they're very aggressive. Yeah,
they're great white food.
Yeah, they could have a 800-pound tuna beside them swimming around too. You know what I mean? So, so there any of your basic bass baits, eel, anything that imitates an eel is a really good striper bait as well. They eat eels a lot in the ocean, so that's another good one. They do it in rivers as well, and the eels come up in the rivers in the fall especially.
I think if I were you, I would contact as many local striped bass anglers that you can find on the internet. I would certainly recommend Greg. His charter operation is called Big Bass Barn Charters.
Yeah,
and you can find them on the internet. But I would talk to these guys. It's a really cool community. The striper bass community is a really cool community, really great guys, and they'd be more than happy to let you know who the local experts are in PEI. So that's the route I take. But they're there,
and they probably would bite this right here, Angelo.
Oh, there it is.
There's your bait.
What was that called? A slider, wasn't
it? Sweeper, I think.
Sweeper,
something like that. I think.
Yeah. If you look at the back end of the bait, the back end being the part without the gill plate, you'll see that there's a plastic wing. It has two plastic wings on the back. So think of this bait, for those of you bass fishermen, think of this bait as a Zara spook designed to do what a Zara spook does on the surface, designed to do it subsurface. And that subsurface can be 2 feet, a foot, 4 feet, depending, because it's not a floater. It's a neutral buoyancy. So you can crank this thing down 3, 4 feet, 5 feet, and then let it dance just like a Zara spook. It is insane. Insane. We had two of them that I bought in England, brought back from England, and I believe they're both now living in the depths of some lake in northern Ontario somewhere, but they're great.
This week he couldn't wait to get used to it. He used it in BC. He used it in Sault Ste. Marie. He used it everywhere. I didn't even get a chance to look at that bait. As soon as we got in the boat, he already had it in his pocket. I never had a chance with that thing. It's that good.
It's made by a company called Salmo, by the way, and you've probably seen Salmo baits here. Not that one, but Salmo makes some great crankbaits. Some really good, realistic, top quality, like hand-painted balsa wood baits. They're fantastic, and we just happened to be in England at a carp show of all things, and we found those, and we bought two of those, but a whole bunch from that grouping.
And those two are the best.
Cost me a fortune.
There you go. Angelo spent more of that trip for sure.
Jerry wants to know: do normally rely on having a guide to ensure you find the best spots? If not, how do you prepare? Okay, so I think we covered this in subsequent programs the last few weeks. First of all, if you're going to a lodge where you have the services of a guide available, or not even a lodge, if you're going to Bay of Quinte, for the first time, and there is a guide available or a charter boat operator available, spend the money. It is the best money that you can spend. And here's why. It's very simple. That person lives there, lives on that water. That person probably has an intimate relationship with the fish that you want to find. That person has a vested interest in making sure that you find fish. So, like, why not? Why not spend the half day money, whether it's 200, 300, 400, 500,000? That's probably a little on the top end. But the point I'm trying to make, especially if you're going in someplace for a few days, why not do that the first day? Spend some money, get the local expertise on your side, understand what they're doing, what they're feeding on, size, shape, color of bait, presentation, and most importantly, location. And now have at it for the rest of the week. We do it. We do it all the time. Now, there are situations where that's not available. There are, I would say, about 40% of our shoots, we don't have that available to us. So then we have to dig deep and do our own figuring, right? But if we have it available to us, of course, we always talk to the local experts. Why wouldn't we?
So Jerry, just to go the opposite, we will. It's our job to produce a TV show. So if there's a guide available, we're going to use them. That's for sure. We don't use them every day, and they're not even on our boat as a rule. Right? They'll usually have another boat. They'll say, "Okay, guys, there's a big break line here. Work all this, and I'll go look to see here." So we're working with these guys and all that stuff. But that said, they save so much time. If, for instance, the Buck Lake thing I just put on the web, we just did an article on the internet on fishingcanada.com. where we didn't have a guide. We went in, they flew us into a camp, said, "Here you go, boys, have at her." So we had to fish, and we didn't even have the camera for most of the shoot. Ange and I, was such bad weather, but we ran, in our case, we run Garmin. So we ran our Garmin GPS chart plotter fish finder. And we literally, since the lake was uncharted, we just basically took, well, actually the host, the pilot told us, "Okay, here's a couple spots on the map, try this up." That's it, on a paper map. So now we got to go and say, "Okay, let's try these 3 spots." We took one of these points. We started to catch some fish around it. So then we said, "Okay, let's draw this out." So we actually mapped our area. We just went back and forth and back. And you should check this article out because it really shows it well. And that's a portable, inexpensive fish finder. And we mapped out the entire area so that we could see literally exactly where these fish were to almost the 2-foot range. It was between around the 16 feet was the number for walleye. Shallower was pike, deeper you couldn't get anything. So we literally marked around that 16-foot range. We marked the hump off of a point, and we shot our whole show in that one spot like that. So we got a little bit of a hint to go. We would have probably found that spot anyways because it was a huge point. It was a perfect looking spot. So you look for these obvious spots, and then we go from there and really dig in deep after that.
Do you remember what that point was called? It was a weird name.
Yeah.
Turkey Vulture Point or something like weird like that.
I can't remember, honestly. It was a weird name to it, but yeah.
Vulture Point. It was a weird name. By the way, Pete just kind of brushed through it, but I have to, when credit is due, credit has got to be given. And the folks at Garmin, when they came up with that quick draw option on even their lower end units, it's not like it's just available on the big expensive units. I mean, quick draw, you can get a quick draw option on a $300 unit, if I'm not mistaken, right, Pete?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah.
When they came up with that, they just unlocked so many fish for folks to experience and have fun with. In a lot of cases, even if the lakes are charted, in a lot of cases, the real fine details are just not there. With quick draw, you're actually painting a picture of what's below the boat, exactly as it is today, this very minute, not when that particular chart was put together. Right now, this very minute. And this becomes really important in a lot of areas that have got strong prevailing north winds, for example, a lot of tight areas where you've got channels. There's always sediment and whatnot blowing in at the bottom of those channels that change the contours on a regular basis. With quick draw, you never have to worry about that. You go out, you turn it on, you make some runs over the area, and now you've got a clear and concise picture of what you're fishing. It is worth its weight in gold. And hats off to the folks at Garmin for putting that out there. So. And
you can draw your maps 2 ways we do it. We'll do it if we're just looking, then we'll just cover water at a good speed. But you can also draw as you're fishing. Do a drift. You draw one spot, go a little bit further over, do another drift, do it a little farther over. All of a sudden, you've got everything mapped out as you were fishing. You know what I mean? So you can do it a couple of ways too. It doesn't stop for fishing, but it will help you in the long run for sure. When you see, if you go to that article, you're going to see the little hump that we fished. You're going to look and say, "Wow!" And we had no idea that hump was there. The lodge doesn't even know that hump was there. Nobody knew. They just knew the fish were around there. So,
well, it's a good point. The lodge had no idea that was there, and so it's a help to them as well. But we started playing around with this a few years ago on the St. Lawrence, where you have a lot of moving water, and we found that even those really detailed navionics charts that we've all been using for so long, especially on the St. Lawrence, even they were off. And that's the key to Quick Draw, is that it gives you that image today, not a month ago or a year ago or 5 years ago. Today, it's exactly what's under the boat today. That's why it's so important. What's the name of that article, Pete? For people who want to go on fishingcanada.com and read it.
Wow, good question, buddy. Jordan's going to put it up. I know Jordan's going to put it up very, very, very soon because he's panicking right now. And
you're counting on it.
Why should Pete have to put that up when I can put that up on the screen? We'll get it for you in a second, folks. Because
we'll get you the name of that article here before we sign off.
Good read.
It's a good read, and it really opens your eyes on the importance of being able to see what's there immediately as opposed to older charts.
Jordan's not putting it up, so I'm gonna scoot over there and I'm gonna find it for us all.
Heart, best place to fish within an hour away from Hamilton, Ontario, with kayak. Why don't you make it even more difficult? Let's just say on a Monday and in 80-degree weather. You know.
Let me interrupt. Why mapping uncharted lakes is important. That's the article. So there you go.
Repeat that.
Uncharted lakes is important. Okay.
Okay. And it's on fishingcanada.com, and I highly recommend anybody who's into really, learning about the advantages of good electronics. You read that piece for sure. So, best place to fish within an hour of Hamilton, Ontario, with the kayak.
The hammer. I love the hammer. You don't like the hammer?
I'll let you start while I get the computer going.
You know what? I mean, the only areas that I have personally fished in that area is Lake Ontario, unfortunately. Now, on a calm day, your kayak is as good as our Fishing Canada Princecraft. There's no doubt about it. But on a rough day, you can't do that. The Hamilton Harbor has got lots of bass in it, believe it or not. And it's got walleye in it, big walleye in it, believe it or not. But then when you go out, or no, I'm thinking, I'm more thinking even St. Catharines, that's less than an hour for sure. You can go to St. Catharines area on the lake, and the creeks that feed into the lake, they're big enough. Some of the creeks are big enough at the mouths, et cetera, et cetera. You can probably drop the kayak in. You'd have to plan your day properly. But other than that, is Lake Simcoe within an hour of Hamilton?
No, not really.
The south end, the Holland River is, maybe an hour and a bit.
Holland River is good, but I got one closer to him. 16 Mile Creek.
Yeah. Is it wide? Is it got a
16 Mile Creek? Great bass, great place to go largemouth bass fishing. Nice thing about that is that it's really hard to fish it with anything other than a kayak or a float tube or a small little car topper that you can kind of drag. There's no real launches. It's look it up. It's pretty cool for largemouth. I'm sure there's other species in there. Never experienced other species, but a really good largemouth bass. And there's a whole bunch of rivers and creeks dumping in the whole Golden Horseshoe area. If you look beyond the obvious, there's a ton of water that dumps into that part of the lake, and most of them are accessible or usable with kayaks, and not accessible by big boats. So I'd be keying on anything that dumps into Lake Ontario, it's going to have fish in it. You know it.
Yeah.
Not guaranteed what species, but it's going to have fish.
I would imagine 16's got carp in it too. I would think.
Huge carp.
Yeah.
Huge carp. Yeah.
There, and it gets a salmon run in the fall, right?
That I don't know, but I'd be surprised if it didn't.
Yeah, I think
I'd be really surprised. It's a big body of water, big, wide, and long. It's fantastic. So
there you go. The hammer. I love the hammer.
The hammer.
It's a heavy now.
Tim wants to add to the question: does coloring the hook red matter? Great question. Thoughts on Siwash hooks versus treble hooks on spoons or pike and walleye. So let's go to the color first. I really think it makes a huge difference, personally, and I don't know if it's at times a deterrent or not. That's the part that I'm not 100% sure on. And that's the part that has me guessing all the time. But I do know when it's not a deterrent, it makes a huge difference. Now, that might sound pretty vague to you, but if you've used red hooks at all on any of your baits, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There's times where you've thrown it out there and you kind of doubt yourself and you second guess. But there's other times where you've thrown a red hook after you've been throwing non-colored hooks and caught a fish enough times to convince you that there's something to this. So I do believe that the color red, as we all know, probably the most popular bait of all time. And I dare say it probably, from the beginning of angling to today, it's still probably used as much as any other bait on the planet. And that is the red and white daredevil. And there's a ton of other red baits that we've all used from time to time. So it's no coincidence that the color red does spark an interest from anglers, or from fish. So putting it on your hook, yeah, why not? So
I'm assuming it to the fish it signifies danger or bleeding or something else like that. That's what I'm assuming that it does, right? So, and if that's the case, fish are very, very much, they're a predator, but they're a scavenger almost. They'll take advantage, let's just say. So if something's bleeding and they know it's alive and they want to eat it, they're going to take it. So the red, I don't use red hooks a lot myself.
No, you don't.
I don't add them on. I like just a good regular black treble myself or whatever, but it's just me.
So two different opinions, and neither one of them is right or wrong. It's just, we talked about it a while back about confidence, right? You either have confidence in something or you don't, which leads us to the second part of your question, the Siwash hooks versus treble. Conventional thinking will have you say, well, obviously, given the option, I'd rather have 3 hooks than one. That makes sense, right? But I know guys who would never throw a treble hook anymore and Siwash only. And that's that confidence thing. I think that the treble in some cases might take away from the full potential of that bait. And in other words, the action of that bait, because Siwash offers less resistance in the water than a treble hook does, allowing the bait to do more of what it was designed to do. But the same token, 1 hook versus 3, one contact point versus 3, pretty hard to make that argument.
Yeah. I got a buddy that fishes Lake Ontario a lot, and running these spoons, etc. Most of the guys are running the big Siwash, single Siwash hooks, him included, until he started using mustad triple grips, big mustad triple grips. He will not go back to a Siwash now. He says that
Sean?
Yeah. He says that thing's incredible. It hooks him. It's a heavy duty hook. It's got a little bit of that inward. The triple grip has got that little inward. He says you don't lose them. Big Chinooks don't open them up and that. But you're talking about a beefy hook. I'm sure he's talking about a number 1, or I'm not sure what the number is, but it's a good size hook. You know what I mean? Well, it would match a salmon spoon, let's just say. But it's he doesn't piss around with all that thin wire. It's thick wire, and he says it's incredible, the hooking power on that triple grip. So
I think the circumstances would gauge and determine whether in some cases, you can't use treble hooks. They're against the law, right? In some jurisdictions, it's a single hook only. And then Siwash is the only thing you got.
Yeah.
If you're, and I'm not talking about salmon fishing in the Great Lakes with great big spoons, but if you're fishing trout, for example, and you're using smaller spoons or smaller baits, sometimes a single Siwash is a great alternative to damaging the fish with a treble hook.
Yeah.
In those cases, you really don't care. If it gets off, what's the big deal, right? But you know that if you catch a fish on a Siwash hook, chances of doing less damage, or than a treble hook are definitely. something that you should take into consideration. But I don't know. It'd be great if we all fish with single hooks, no barbs.
Yeah,
that would be a perfect world, but it's not.
We've done that out of necessity, eh? So, I mean, we'll take a bomber minnow bait, and then in certain spots where you can't use it, and we'll just put that single sidewash on the back, bend the barb in, and that's the only hook you got off the back. And you know what? You still catch fish on it. I'll tell you that. You still do catch fish.
Okay, here's a question for you in that case, and maybe Tim as well if he's done it. When you're putting a single hook, sidewash hook on
I put the hook up.
How'd you know what I was going to ask?
You can't ask too many things about that. I mean, what the heck? I mean, what else can you ask?
I was going to say, do you use red?
No, you weren't.
No. The question is it turned up or down?
Yeah, I do up only because, I mean, I'm used to that spinner baits, buzz baits, chatter baits. All those baits have a hook up. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it's just what I do. I have confidence again. If I turned it down. Now, I'll tell you what, I have taken a spinner bait and had the regular hook up and put the trailer hook down just because I'm getting short strikers and that. I'm trying to pop them in that bottom jaw because sometimes they're not hitting it right? So I have done that, but not very often.
That sounds like a desperation move.
No, for sure it is, buddy. For sure it is. There's no
That's after you've missed about 4 or 5 in a row, right?
That's the only reason I would do that. You know what I mean? The only reason, or I'd go to a treble trailer hook or something like that, because otherwise, I wouldn't do it. So,
yeah.
What else we got? Anything? We're going good.
Where in Ontario is a good lake for shore fishing? Man, we get asked this so much lately. Eh? Everybody wants.
That's another article we have on the website. Do I not? Is it not an Ontario article that we put up there this spring?
I think so.
I will look right now.
The 5 of the best shoreline fishing in Ontario article.
Sure we do. Let me just.
Yeah, it's on fishingcanada.com. It gives you 5, but also references a few other. And I'll tell you, they're all key areas that are widely accessible, tons of great fishing opportunities, and not far from most urban centers. And I think that's the other key, right? Now, Pete and I, quite honestly, up until I'm going to say 10, between 5 and 10 years ago, shore fishing was the farthest thing from our minds that you could possibly ask for. But then we got involved in carp fishing and started getting interested in carp fishing. And I'll tell you, it gets under your skin real quick. And that fishery is predominantly right now, anyways, in Canada and worldwide is a shore fishery. Although we're starting to try and market it as a boat fishery because we've done so much carp fishing out of our FNC1 Princecraft the last few years, and with great success, that I think it's not just a shore fishery anymore. I think it's a viable boat fishery. But since those days, we've started paying more attention to the great opportunities for shore anglers that we've got, and there's so many of them that are untouched, unutilized. And what do we do? What do we do when we're out in the boat? We look for shorelines to go fish with the boat. Right?
That's so true, eh? That article, you go to fishingcanada.com and you go to FNC listicles in the drop down on the red bar. It's called Shore Fishing Top 5 Spots in Southern Ontario. So,
by the way, I want to remind folks, because I just got caught on this today, there is a button, like Pete said, on that website that's called, what are they called? What'd you call it?
FNC listicles.
FNC listicles. A lot of the articles that we've published end up going there and nowhere else, although I understand that's about to change today. But you want to go and check that out because there's some great stuff in there that you might have missed and didn't even know were there. And most of them are lists of places, lists of baits, lists of presentations, lists of top 5s, and some great stuff in there that you need to check out for sure.
So hopefully you'll go there and you can get a few answers to do the shore fishing questions. Cal, what's you gonna say?
Intrepid Park in Whitby. Well, that used to be, my dad used to fish there, and his friends used to fish there. And that was 100 years ago, pretty much. They used to go there and catch pike, carp, quite a bit.
Is it at the harbor ends, or where is that?
Yeah, well, it's just before the harbor that you're familiar with, the one that we use.
Right.
just between Oshawa and Whitby. Intrepid is, you know where our old studio was?
Yep.
That area from there towards Whitby.
Okay.
And some great pike fishing. In fact, if you go to Google Earth and go to that part of the map and put it on satellite, you're going to see a piece of water that's completely landlocked from Lake Ontario, and it's about 4 acres, maybe 5 acres, completely landlocked. When we had the studio down at Philip Murray, Randy Jennings, who used to be one of our guys on the show, he discovered it one day, not using Google Satellite because it wasn't available. He actually found it, right? And so we dragged, I can't remember the details, but we got a little boat in there one time, and we shot a Fishing Canada episode in this little piece of water not far from Intrepid Park. I don't know whether it's still there, although it was big enough. Although if somebody opened, there's a thin piece of land that blocked it from dumping back out into Lake Ontario, and what made it landlocked.
Okay.
Now somebody might have opened it, and of course then the water. I don't know where. This is years ago. This is back in the early '80s.
Right.
When we fished it. So yeah, great area for pike. That whole stretch, that whole area is just fantastic for pike and carp. But I'd be shocked if there weren't bass and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like Darlington Park, all those Lake Ontario holes there. You know what I mean? I found a spot one time on Lake Ontario going towards Picton there. It's called Pleasant Bay, and it was a little wee creek that emptied in. It's by Weller's Bay. It's a little wee creek that emptied into Lake Ontario, and I could just barely get my bass boat in it. And I went in there and I clocked a largemouth. There was one patch of reeds about the size of yours, my office hands, and I just went around that and pop, 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 pop. I got largemouth after largemouth after that. It was great, you know what I mean? Since then, it's closed up too, though. It's washed in or something like that.
There are so many little tributaries that come off of Lake Ontario that are never fished and that hold water. Anything that dumps into Lake Ontario has got the potential of having some incredible game fish. No doubt about it. So,
Jordan said, I don't know if he's got any more. He says he's running out of questions, and we still have this stuff from last week. I can rip through real quick too, and then maybe get another one up there. Have you guys ever? This is from maintenance guys. Have you guys ever lost an outboard motor while fishing? I have not had that happen. I've heard of it happen.
We almost did.
Yeah.
We potentially almost lost a big V6 or Verado.
Oh, when we were parked, you mean?
Well, we didn't find out till we came off the water.
Yeah.
Don't you remember?
Oh.
We didn't know. The way we found out was we came off the water after fishing for a whole day, and we found out that there was no nuts left on 2 or 3 of our bolts.
We were up in White River staying overnight the one time, and we had the boat right by our rooms, right parked behind the hotel, and somebody still came in and peeled the nuts off that, and they were going to try and steal the rig on us. I think it was like it was. So that you're right. That could have been very, very devastating for sure.
Would have been crazy.
But we have not. You know.
Somebody wanted to know that they want to buy a fish finder for about $300. What would you recommend? Striker.
Yeah, the Garmin Striker series, a 5-inch striker, is in that range, and it's got like a traditional screen. It's got the chirp in your traditional, so it's got the modern day signals and pulses going down. It's also got clear view. It's also got a down view that Garmin has, and it's called clear view. Great unit for that price, you know what I mean? So the Striker series is good.
The best of all, it's got quick draw.
I believe that one. It doesn't have a card slot.
No,
but it might be able to quick draw. I'm not sure.
It does quick draw, but you can't export it. It does quick. The Striker does quick draw.
So
great unit.
The Striker series is great, really well priced, and very efficient, especially at the fish finding aspect of it, and marking waypoints, etc. So
if you want to get more details on it, even the cost, like we're thinking it's about $300, but I'm not 100% sure. But go to radioworld.ca. radioworld.ca. They are the largest retailer of electronics in the country. It doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're in BC or Newfoundland. Radio World services the entire country, and they're the largest distributor / retailer of electronics in Canada. So check with them, and it's Radio World, all one word, radioworld.ca, and look up the Garmin Striker fish finder.
Next, Tim Sturgeon from last week said, can you troll umbrella rigs? I've never heard of it being done, but why couldn't you? Why could you not troll umbrella rigs, especially for muskie or something like that? Get a decent size, like the bigger umbrella rigs, and start pulling them behind a downrigger, a shallow, running your rigger down 8 feet and pulling these umbrella rigs. Why could you not do that?
Yeah, I think control depth you could.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're in relatively shallow water and the umbrella rig is down towards that bottom end, you might run into some problems because it's a lot bigger profile than just a single bait, right?
Yeah.
But I think I don't see why it's not being used. To be quite honest with you, and maybe it is. I don't see why it's not being used in the Great Lakes.
Yeah. Think
for
about
salmon behind a downrigger.
You put the right bait behind it. You know what I mean? You put the right. First off, the umbrella rig, for people that don't realize, look it up on the internet to get a really good look at it. But it's just basically four. Well, in Ontario, you're only allowed 4 baits behind it. So you have 4 wire arms. In the U.S., they have 5 usually, and you put a lure or bait behind it, and you can have a hook bait on each one of those 4. So a jig, let's just use as an example. And this thing spreads out like an umbrella. Now you've got 4 little baits coming behind you instead of 1. It's archaic looking. It's not finesse whatsoever because these are wires, just like a spinnerbait wire. It's crazy looking. It's a way thicker than any leader you ever used, but they do work at times for aggressive fish. So you can look up umbrella rig, and you'll or Alabama rig is another name for it.
Yeah.
You'll see on the internet.
I think in the Great Lakes it would be deadly.
I think for salmon, I think it'd be great for sure.
Ron Leroux wants to know, he bought scent balls. Is that cheating? And do they work?
Is that cheating? I love that.
Cheating in what sense now? I'm trying to...
He must think it's just, is it legal or illegal? But it's perfectly legal. I mean,
he's chumming an area then.
Right? They're designed for angling, and you just have to make sure of the province that you're in or the state that you're in or whatever like that, make sure it's legal in that sense. And then, you should be able to good to go because they make these for fishing, right? They bubble, they have scent, and they bubble out and they attract the fish by sitting there on the bottom in that kind of an attractant.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. That's from a legality standpoint. Obviously, you got to check and make sure. But let's talk about morally speaking. What do you think? Is it okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think why not? I mean,
I can see people bringing that up. I can see people saying, that it's wrong. I can see people saying, well, now you're attracting fish to you, and you're not going out looking for them, and it's morally, I mean, let's be honest about it. There's reason and cause for people who are not into fishing to suggest that what we do is just not right. This is just maybe another tool for them to use, but from a morals, I don't see anything wrong with it.
No,
whether you're scenting your bait, or right?
You got a hydrowave machine that sets out pulses and signals, electronic signals that are shooting down into the water, sounding like shad spawning, shad fleeing, et cetera, et cetera. That's perfectly legal, So there's different attractants in attractive ways. So I mean, is chumming for shark on the East Coast? That should be illegal. Then you shouldn't be able to cut up a bunch of chum bait and hang a bucket off the back of your boat, right?
Not illegal, immoral. Not the legalities. Just is it right? That's my only question.
That's the way you catch them, buddy. That's the way you get them sharks out there. I think it's totally moral. You want to put a shark in the boat, you better hang some blood off the back.
Peter Pitre wants to know, in one of your previous fishing trips, you had a bell attached to your tip of your lines. I'm assuming tip of the rod, maybe in New Brunswick or also on an ocean trip. Can you please point out where these can be purchased? Now, is he talking a bell? In which case,
I thought Bite Alarm first, but I don't think he's talking.
Maybe a carp episode.
If it's NB, if it's New Brunswick or an ocean trip, obviously not. I mean, I've seen people put little bell dingle ding, 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 for a bite indicator on the end of their rod. You know what? Maybe it was something like the Shubenacadie or something like that. Maybe we had one of us or somebody else there might have been doing it.
So, Bert, if you're with us today, I'm going to put a challenge out to you because obviously these 2 old farts have forgotten more than they remembered. But if you could be a little more precise on that, tell us what give a little more information on the episode, where it was, etc. We'll look into it. I do not recall right now, this very minute, aside from using a strike indicator when carp fishing, I don't recall us using anything for anything else. That
Yeah. So Bert, if you want to send it back into us, we'll definitely answer if we can.
Yep.
For sure.
Outdoorsy girl wants. Oh, she said she loved my shirt from last week. Here it is. I just happen to have it here because I knew we'd be dealing with this.
Look at that. Hey, Monique mentioned it yesterday too. It must be a chick magnet, that shirt, or is it just you? Maybe it's you.
Me, buddy. It's me. Yeah, it's a great shirt. They just came in. I wore. In fact, they showed up the day that we did the webcast last week.
That's right.
And I threw it on. I said, "That's cool. Let me throw it on." So, very nice. Different color. Different. It's got that fatigue kind of printing on it. Looks old. It's very cool.
Do their t-shirts shrink? No, these Princecraft shirts are very good for.
Here's what I'd like you to do, Outdoorsy girl. Do yourself and me a favor, and anybody else who's listening and watching. I want you to write a little note, a little email to Princecraft, telling them that you saw their new 2020 t-shirt on the Fishing Canada webcast, and the guys from Fishing Canada told you that if you wrote to them nicely, you'd probably get one. And you're going to address it to a guy. You're going to address it to a guy by the name of J.P. Martin. John.
You see, you're playing real. You're stepping. There's only that much ice what you're walking on right now.
I love it. He'll do it. Do it. Okay.
You have to spend a few bucks, folks, but you never know.
Well, you know what he's going to do? He's going to reach out to me. Okay, you want me to send him? You pay for it. So
that's the best.
Send everybody listening. Send JP Martin a little note saying that you saw their brand new Princecraft t-shirt on the Fishing Canada webcast, and that you were told that if you write to them and ask them nicely, they will give you one. Do that. And something nice is going to happen. I'll guarantee it. JP's a great guy, by the way.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Real good. You'll get one, just so that you know. So
that's good.
Backcountry Angling Ontario. What do you guys consider a trophy bass weight in Canada? Is it 6 pounds? And what would you say south of the border, excluding the giants in Texas and California? We talked about this with Roland Martin on last Friday, how everybody just assumes that you go to Florida and you're going to get a 10-pound fish, 10-pound bass. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, their average fish is not much bigger now than our average up here. And ours are getting bigger by the year. So I would say a 5-pound trophy in Canada is still considered a trophy, a 5-pound, either smallmouth or largemouth. That's still a huge bass. Don't ever be embarrassed to call a 5-pounder a trophy. But a 6-pound, that's insane. Insane. And south of the border, that 6-pound is still a good fish. Still a really good fish.
Absolutely. I agree on both. That 5-pound mark, you're talking on a largemouth, you're talking about a 20 and a half inch fish. You know, at 21, he's starting to get to that big into that 6-pound range. So you got, if you don't have a scale on you, you got a 20 inch largemouth that looks nice and fat. That's a 5-pounder. That's the mark that Ange and I go for every year. That's to me, that's the number that you want to hit once in a season if you can. I didn't hit one last year. I wanted to get I always look for a 5-pounder or bigger. Anything bigger is a bonus. So that 5-pound largemouth is my mark. On smallmouth, I think I've upped that up to a little higher now because the smallies around southern Ontario are getting big. They're just getting huge. So that 5-pounder is a great fish. But I'd say, maybe a 5.5 to 6 on that one would be now more of a real upper level. If you get, like Ann says, a 6-pound largemouth, set off the fireworks, because I'll tell you what, that's a Canadian beast of a fish. You know what I mean? It's a great fish, and you have accomplished something very well when you get a 6+ largemouth bass in Canada. And
with all due respect to bass anglers, and please don't get upset at me. Please don't call me anti-fishing. Please don't call me anti-Christ. Please don't call me anything. Okay, I'm telling the truth to all people out there who catch a fish and somebody tells them that they just caught an 8-pound or 10-pound bass. Chances are it ain't an 8 or 10-pound bass. It's the only way I could be respectful and tell you that. A 5-pound fish is huge. A 6-pound is breathtaking. Breathtaking.
Yep.
In terms of bass. So most people will overstate the weight of their big bass. And most people, in fact, most 5-pounders are 4s. That's the reality of it. Most 5s are 4s. And that's just the way it is. So when you get a true honest 5 on a set of scales that are real scales, not that little spring thing that's been sitting in the bottom of your tackle box since 1964 that you have never used, and you drag it out and put that 3-pounder on there and it goes down to 5 pounds, that ain't a 5-pound fish. Plain and simple. It is not.
We've heard so many, by being in the media, by being in the industry, Angelo and I get so many fish stories talked to us about all species and all that. But the one that really gets me the most is these people that talk about the 8-pound largemouth they caught in Bob's Lake there north of Kingston. And I, like, honest to God, I fished largemouth my whole life in Ontario and across, if there's, like, I've done Saskatchewan, I've done BC. I might have caught a 7 once. I think it was a 7-pounder. We didn't weigh it. Mikey Burris and I were pre-fishing for a tournament, and it was an absolute giant. Maybe 1 7. Maybe there's another one that touched close to 7. Other than that, I've got about 4 or 5 6-pounders in my life of largemouth fishing. And Ange knows that's all I want to do is catch a big bass for the season. So when you hear about these 8-pounders in Canada, folks, okay, we're not calling you liars, but we're telling you better measure that fish and you better weigh it on a good scale, because I'll tell you what, an 8 is unbelievable. Okay, it is a 6-pound largemouth. Put a scale on it. If your largemouth is 21, maybe 21 and a half inches long, you got a 6. Okay, that's honest. And it'll look like an 8. I guarantee you, if you don't know much about bass fishing, you'll get the odd one. That's going to look like an 8 to you or a 9-pounder, because they're so big, they're so fat, they're so gorgeous. But a 6 is rare. So,
not to say that they haven't been caught, not to say that people haven't caught them. I just,
absolutely,
for the most part, they're not. That's all. By the way, Critter saying, "Oh boy, Princecraft is going to like you after that comment." Listen, we have a tremendous relationship with the folks at Princecraft. We have been with Princecraft since 1986, so we've been partners. It's more of a family thing than it is a partnership. So when I tell you to do this, it's do it. Okay, JP will he'll scream and yell at me. Of course he will, like he does every other time I do stuff like this. But that's cool. Send it to him. He'll appreciate it in the long run. Dean Talbot wants to know: do you use a stringer hook?
Stinger
hook. What is that?
A stinger hook.
Oh, a stinger. Sorry. You start reading these things. My eyes are getting tired. Stinger hook. So spinner baits, obviously, pretty much, whenever it's possible in non-weed choked areas. Yeah. But I've also, and I think I answered this question a few weeks ago, I also started using those little tiny treble stinger hooks that are pre-rigged that you can put on the back of a small jig or anything on the back of any other hook.
Carolina rig.
Yeah. Sometimes when the walleye are really, really, that real finicky bite, sometimes that little extra stinger hook catches them. And it's certainly improved my walleye in particular, walleye catching with them. But yeah, listen, any advantage you can get, it's tough catching fish. Let's be perfectly honest, folks. It doesn't matter what those guys on TV make it look like. It's tough. Every fish is tough to catch.
Every advantage you can.
And a stinger's, I think, becoming a vital part of a good angler's equipment.
Yeah, I think it's putting the odds in better favor for you. You know what I mean? Like smallmouth bass fishing with spinner baits. Okay, you can do it every time because it's always open water. Like let's say 99% of the time it's open water. So why not put a trailer hook on the back? You know what I mean? It ups your odds, and you don't need to go real big. Like a number 2 don't go to the giant, long, real long trailer hooks. You can do it with a shorter, a real stout trailer hook. And the question I've always got asked, and I still don't know how to answer this, is do you put the elastic around the eye of the hook and then pop it on so that stinger hook is staying straight out? Or do you put the stinger hook on first to let it flop around and put your elastic on afterwards? And the jury is still out on that one with me. I like to have it dangling, and put the hook on first, then stop it. But you always got to make sure that you push that rubber up as high as you can, close-ish to the barb or the main hook. Because if it pushes down, that hook is going to be dangling the wrong angle. So it dangles at a better angle. So either way, you got to adjust it all the time. But a stinger hook is great. And don't forget treble hooks, stinger treble hooks. So if you got a big eye on the treble hook, it can work really good on smallmouth too. And those real bumper bites, you can get that. And you work it either. There's two ways you can put it on. You can have either the single treble up on a treble or the single treble down on a treble. Even that comes into play sometimes too. So treble hooks are very, very, very effective for sure.
Experimenting, that's the key. I just thinking, what you're saying, experimenting. Don't be afraid to experiment. There is no do's and don'ts, really. It's a matter of trying things out, and what works for you, do it. Do more of it and less of what doesn't work. That's what fishing is all about. Let's be honest. That's exactly what it's about. So.
Yeah, man. Is that it? We're done?
Tell us more about the propane mercury you used. Well, I can't because I didn't use it. I don't know, why wasn't I on that shoot? Anyways,
I don't know.
You used it. Go ahead.
We used it once. We used it on a brook trout shoot north of Massey, and all I can say, Tim, is the only difference was there was no gas in the bottom of the boat. There was no gas leaks out in the lake. There was no oil slicks. There was none of that rainbow look on that, and the smell was different than normal gas. I could smell propane like your barbecue tank. That was all. Everything else worked exactly the same. We brought it in about 20 pounds.
How about starting the motor, Pete? Was there any difference?
It was the same thing, bud. It was the same thing. Honestly, you prime it much. This was a brand new motor, so this is the first day it's ever been out. It was out of the crate. We took it with us. You know what I mean? It got broken in, or not broken in. It got PDI'd at the marina. And then they sent it to us. It's ready to go. We put it on, and it worked just like any other outboard I've ever used. Honestly, like it was great.
Is the performance data back on these things yet, or are they performing?
No, you know what? It's such a small horsepower. I think there was a 5-horse motor, right? So what kind of performance do you expect out of that versus something else? So and I used it basically for A to B and then trolling. And I trolled with it. Like I had the electric, I had the motor guide on the back. But what Angelo and I do a lot is if they're biting with the main motor and it's not scaring them, why not use the main motor? And then you have to play around with knocking the motor, the electric in and out. That thing, I trolled with that thing all day and to and from, and it worked great. The odd time it wouldn't start, but they just prime it a little bit and boom, and it starts right up again. So I really enjoyed using it. It was different for sure.
How did you find, or did you even notice the difference between a low, wide plastic gas container versus a round, stubby barbecue?
Great point. I put it, so I'm sitting there with the tiller, right? So I got how does it work? So that hand on the tiller handle, I put it behind me in that little back sump area on the opposite corner. You had no idea there was a gas tank in the boat. Sitting upright, it takes up no room. Barbecue tank.
Right.
And they sell a bracket with it. Mercury sells a bracket with it that you can mount to your boat and have it all sitting there perfect. I didn't need it because we were making it portable anyways. We had to go in and out on an ATV to this lake. I just plopped it in the back of the boat and it sat there the whole time, just like it wasn't there, honestly. Barbecue hose, same thing as a barbecue hose, comes right out of your propane tank into your motor and start her up and go. The only thing it didn't do was cook hamburgers on it. Otherwise, it was great.
I think they're going to do extremely well with it. I really do. I think it's going to continue growing. And keep in mind, they're pioneering this thing, right? They're the first ones that are putting it out. So it's going to evolve in time. But all indication, talking to the folks at Mercury, it's going to be a big part of the Mercury lineup moving forward. Before I forget, you just mentioned a bracket, that they offer a bracket with it. Just reminded me. Tell the folks what bracket we just got in this week that we're all excited about, like little boys.
So if you people are familiar with Garmin, they put out they had Panoptics come out first, then they had Panoptics Live Scope come up next, and we were I'm really excited about both, but this live scope makes life so much easier. It gets easier to use than Panoptics even. So it's basically you're watching for fish on your screen. You're seeing weed beds. You're seeing a tree. It's just an unbelievable system they got. So all of a sudden, Garmin, we're thinking that, hey, this is the best thing ever because it can shoot forward. It gives you a little bit of an angle down behind you. Let's say you're standing in the front of a bass boat or our Princecraft. So you're standing in front of our Princecraft. You can actually literally see a little bit underneath the boat, but everything in front of your boat for, let's say, 50 feet, if you got it set for 50 feet. It's a very narrow swath shooting out, probably a 5-foot swath going out, but you see whatever's in there, and you see anything that moves, you see structure covered, the whole 9 yards. So that's the forward view. If you find something and you're in deep water, you just boop, 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 you tilt your transducer with a couple of clicks, and it shoots to a down view. So now it's showing way behind the boat to in front of the boat, but straight below you. So we're thinking, oh my God, fish haven't got a chance. So then Garmin comes out with his idea, let's change things up and give them another one. So they came up with this perspective mode. So it's an upgrade to your live scope transducer, your live scope system, because there's a box with it. And now you basically take that transducer that was normally sitting like this, you flip it like this,
Crazy.
and now it's shooting this beam out. It's like looking at the only way I can explain it now is like looking at your side view image on your boat. That's the angle that you're looking down. Now you're out the bird's eye view, so you're out in front, looking straight down in front of your boat, and it's scanning at about 100. I think it's 100 and something degrees. It's unbelievable. We haven't used it yet.
120.
120 degrees, and all it is a bracket. So the most confusing part of all this will be is turning your transducer to the right spot, which they have it marked. There's a sticker in the new perspective mode kit, and it has it marked. And all of a sudden, you got to just mount it properly on your trolling motor or on your pole, and then you go click, 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 boom, turn that thing up, and all of a sudden now you got a perspective mode, and it's like I can't wait to use it. It looks freaky scary, especially for shallow water stuff, because live scope is tough sometimes in shallow water. We've seen that 4 feet or 3 feet or 5 feet of water straight forward from 50 feet, weeds and everything in there. It's kind of, you really got to watch close. This all of a sudden you just open up a whole new world to us again. So it's called perspective mode on live scope. It's an expensive upgrade. It's more than most fish finders, just the upgrade to the transducer and the box. But honest to God, if you can afford it, you need it. It is that frigging good. It's deadly. It's freaking deadly. You can cherry pick.
I know we've overused the word game changer when it comes to Garmin over the last 5 years, because of the last 5 years, every year they come out with something that you say, no, I can't believe they did that. It's not even a game changer because it's not even the same game anymore.
Yeah.
It's not the same game. I don't even know what game it is. I have no idea.
You know what amazes me is how the engineers come up with this. Like they were just thinking, you know what? Hey, you know what? We can do this, but why can't we just flip it and do that? And they did it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. What's it called? What's that bracket called? Perspective.
Perspective mode is the new mode. So in order to use perspective mode, you need that bracket to be able to flip. So you spin your transducer and you flip the bracket up. It's sort of a double thing. It's nothing to do. It's absolutely nothing to do. And trust me, the time it takes you to flip that bracket up, it's well worth it dropping that trolling motor back in the water, your stick back in the water, and watching this stuff. So perspective mode is the new mode, and it's just a new bracket that you buy. It's $100, and it's so worth it, man. And
it's available. And what? It's not all transducers, obviously, that will work with it, right?
No, it's just that live scope transducer. I don't know the number of that, but it's the one with the box. There's two transducers. There's two live scope transducers. One that plugs directly in. It only gives you a partial view of below the boat. The real deal is the one that has the box in it, and that's the transducer that you buy. I'm sure we can find it. People can look it up. You'll look up live scope. It's everywhere on the internet right now. Everywhere on the internet now. And guys, now you're starting to see all these perspective view videos coming out too now. And Angelo and I are the same as everybody else. I'm sitting there watching all this stuff. There's a Facebook page for just live scope, and you sit there and watching. Oh my God! And all the U.S. guys, these crappie fishermen that are doing this. It's just incredible seeing all this stuff. We're loving it.
It's crazy.
I love it. So.
So check that out. Also check out fishingcanada.com. We are a couple of days away from making the next Mercury draw at the end of the month. Today's 27th, I believe. So whatever, 3 days from now, we'll be making we'll be finding another good home for a Mercury 4-stroke outboard motor. So If you're not in there already, get to fishingcanada.com, go to the contest section, punch that button. It'll take you to the Merc 2.5 contest. Fill the ballot, drop it in the virtual drum, but you're not finished yet, because at that point, after you did that, you punch the Princecraft contest button, which is there as well. And now you enter a ballot into the boat motor trailer package, which we're giving away. So remember, entering one of those contests does not automatically enter you into another. A lot of folks have been disappointed when they write in and ask us, and we tell them that, because they say, well, I've been coming every day for the last month thinking it was, and it's not automatic. You have to enter into, there's two separate standalone contests. You have to enter in both to be eligible for both. You can't be eligible for both if you just enter one. So remember, that's really important. Of course, that's all happening free on fishingcanada.com. A lot of great articles, a lot of great information. Some of it we talked about today that are must-dos, especially as the fishing season nears, especially bass fishing, as we're all excited to get out and do some of that pretty soon, hopefully. Reminder again, next week we will not be doing a Wednesday webcast. Everything will be moved to the Friday of that week, because we're all coming back to work next week, and we've got to kind of readjust and rejig how things are going to work. This week, Friday at noon, special guest, mystery guest will be joining us. And what else? Am I missing anything, Pete?
You know what? If they missed anything on this cast or any of our other webcasts, it's on YouTube. It goes directly to our YouTube channel. And then what you do is you want to watch the right-hand part of the screen. You can't scroll, but all you do is scroll the video to the right and keep advancing forward and forward. You can watch all the questions show up on the screen as you do that. So if you missed anything, the link to that one article for sure is in there. And Jordan put the link into that what do you call it? Quick Draw article. He put that in there, the link. So it won't work. The link won't work, but you'll be able to get it and copy it and write it in or whatever like that. So yeah, that's about it. Everybody, hopefully you're surviving this pandemic crap as best you can. You know what I mean? We're doing the best we can. We want to get out there. We do want to get out there and start filming for you guys and girls. So trust us, and we're not taking the lazy route out here. We're waiting. We're chomping at the bit. Once Angelo gets his racing motor on, you watch that sumbitch go, because that thing is going to be great.
A 300R.
I know, on a Princecraft. Insane, brother.
So what else? On behalf of the entire Fishing Canada crew, who are all going to reunite this coming Monday under one roof in one building for the first time since, I don't know, it's been what, 2.5 months, I guess, since we've been together.
Yeah, crazy.
On behalf of the entire team, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate your support, and we will continue plugging along as long as we can. I don't know what needs, because we don't know what the future is going to bring. But thanks for joining us, folks. We'll talk to you on Friday at noon. Take care,
folks. See ya.